wonderful Jerry bird. You know Jerry Holmes, this is typical Jerry Holmes.
Castles in the backseat, belchers in the bar, raps and slaps and snotty handkerchiefs. Toothpaste in the basin, undies in the loo. Is this how it's really meant to be? Don't my skin like I'm standing back, no one wants to go to the pub. I don't think I like being in a family.
We sing together!
We belong together. There is nothing to deny. We're a family. Hey, hey.
1, 2, 3, 4.
We belong together. There is nothing to deny. We're a family. Hey,
Fusion 1991 annual conference at beautiful Coonawarra. Isn't it a fantastic place? What do you reckon? A bit of a surprise to turn up. Here we came. I don't know what we were expecting, but it's certainly an improvement. Has to be the best site we've been to as far as the rooms and surroundings are concerned, the facilities. What's that? What about vanilla? Yeah, let's forget about vanilla. That's what we'll do about vanilla. We'd be aware Mal is our National Director and is absent from conference this year because he had the opportunity to go to Brighton 91, an international conference on evangelism, and that's great for him. That is probably great for us in some ways, but challenging for us in other ways. But the great thing is that his family is here to represent him, and so we welcome at conference Jenny on the left there, and then the children. There's Danielle and Matthew all the way down from Broken Hill. Great that he's taken a week's holiday to be with us at conference. Lizzie, and then Nathaniel somewhere around.
Last night as I was sitting here, I was thinking about fusion and hearing the reports. I wrote down a few words which seemed to characterise the fusion movement. And some of the words I put down were dynamic, risky, faith, creative, unique, realism, energy, vision for the nation and for the people of God, a desire for the kingdom to come, wholeness. I wrote all those words down because I think you're a wonderful people. You're a unique people, and I want to affirm you in your ministries and all that you're doing.
Well, every time they got together probably, but certainly every time something significant was about to happen, they would remember back over their past what God had done, who they were, how He called them out of Egypt and what He was doing with them. They recall those stories because that's I guess where they reminded themselves of where they were going, who they were and where they were going, their identity. And so that's really what this is about. What we'd like to do is just pick up some highlights. The pace at which things have been happening is really quite staggering when we start reminding ourselves.
If we went back to 92 at Coonawarra, some of the decisions that we made, and we need to ask ourselves, how have we gone in response to those? Because they're decisions we made and that we share responsibility for. A key one, I'll read you the recommendation that we agreed upon by consensus in 92, that we commit ourselves to have all statutory obligations of the movement up to date by next. We have got that job done, and we can now lodge everything with the government that we need to, so as we clear the board and leave it behind us. I believe, in fact, God has maybe it is that he's even held things back for us as a movement because we hadn't taken care of the past. And we were still in the wilderness, in a sense. And we hadn't dealt with some of our past life. And even with Poatina, I don't think it's accidental that as yet resolution hasn't come on Poatina. Because I think it is very likely that God has been waiting for us to get our house in order before he brings the new thing to us.
I think God wants to trust us with more resources, but we've got to be trustworthy. By now they've probably decided about Poatina. And Poatina is not just about cheap housing, it could become a great diversion. But I think it's a right place to bring people from overseas, to have hospitality, and then send them around looking at us with a view of going back to fulfil their own story in their own cultures.
The joy of that, of course, is that it is like going into the promised land. And I think that's where we now stand. We stand on the edge of the promised land.
She kept saying to me, "You really must do Hebrew and Greek." And I kept saying, "I just want to reach kids." And they said, "You know, go and..." Marty Rose said to me, "Go and have a chat to this guy, Mel Garvin, down at Kilmany." So I came down and Mel leaned across and he grabbed me on the knee and he said, "You know what, mate?" He said, "You're one of us." And it was so good, you see, because I felt like for the first time I'd met other people that shared my dream of reaching Aussies. And IYY had been a really significant thing. And I reckon part of the reason that God helped me to be part of it was what happened there in Canberra because of the decision that people made at that freezing conference.
There was a wise man called Noah. One night, God spoke to Noah. "Noah, you're the only good person." God told him he was going to send a big flood, so Noah would have to build a huge boat.
I can remember they rang us up and said, "Listen, because you've experienced, we don't get the same immediate response you get as we've heard. This is Erica Youngman. Could you help us? Could you cover the Pacific?" In Marion's and mine office, there was a thing on the board, wasn't there, Marion, saying, this self-concept diagram saying, "Marion thinks this is her office." A large illusion, it says. We got thrown out once again, and it became the nearest thing we could produce for a radio, for putting the radio spots together. This is typical of Fusion. Telecom had never ever done anything like this before. And they only knew how to meter certain calls and not other calls, because it was meant, these 00555 are mostly meant for within Australia. The idea of somebody coming in from overseas. And they captured some, so we have a list of those they captured. And here are some of the places that picked up our funny little thing made out of bits and pieces. Tanzania, Norway, Philippines, Singapore, Belgium, Brazil, Iceland, Italy, Mexico, Netherlands, New Guinea, Spain, Finland, Belgium, Hungary, Cambodia, Hong Kong, South Korea, Estonia, Indonesia, South Africa, Texas, Ontario, Canada, Western Samoa, Poland, Czech Republic, Croatia, Greece, Japan, it goes on and on.
Over the years, you've gained an expertise in so many different areas of ministry that other agencies haven't, and other churches haven't. And you've tested them on the test track of life. And you've got so much to offer the church in Australia and Australia as a nation.
And I said, well, if it can be 82,000 Australia, and I said another thing. I said, in what I'm involved with, some of our strongest supporters, Catholic Archbishop Francis Carroll, I am not interested unless brothers from every faith are welcomed. I said, well, this is highly irregular. And I said, well, it's probably a very useful thing for you to confront. And I said, this is where I stand. We all have the story to tell in our own way. And that is the purpose of our existence. But not only to tell our story, to create a way in which our brothers and sisters and whole nations can discover and tell their story.
In what we would term Indigenous mission, being involved as a local person amongst the people of Indonesia, fitted with some of our approach and the work that God was calling us to within Australia. And so at last conference, you may remember, one of our recommendations was that we would consider inviting Paulus to come out here all the way from Indonesia. Is there anything you'd like to say to us just first up, or?
Well, as my heart is warm because of your spirit and pride, and I love to have the same occasion like that in my country.
I'm concerned about the awakening. I think it needs theodynamics undergirding it. And so in RC, we've recommended that next year we establish a base that teaches theodynamics in England.
Again, you are feeling a minority. And it seems to me, as the history of fusion moves on, the Canberra gathering was a watershed, where you had lots of interaction with the Christians all over Australia. And your call, as it comes to you today, is to be involved in the wider Christian community and offer a ministry there, and yet be a pioneer and show the way. You've taken these risks to focus upon the need of the poor and the homeless. You've challenged the media by having a radio program that's lasted 25 odd years. You've produced a magazine and challenged the market. You've taken risks. You've been full of faith as you've stepped out in obedience. And it's always the way with God. He's the God of the impossible. And he just challenges us to be obedient and take that step of faith and be the pioneer.